You know, the first thing I said, there was a comment earlier today about sort of working with some of the big companies like that are sponsoring and supporting our organization. One thing I could say is I've been having lots of conversations over the last 4 years with these entities, and I'm encouraged that there is an awareness that there is a business imperative. And our approach at MMCA was very simple. We understand that no one's going to invest in problems, so we're going to come with innovative common ground solutions because we think there is a business imperative, and media diversity should sit within the sweet spot of these companies. So kudos to all of our partners, our corporate partners, for supporting what we're doing, and we look forward to working with them as we go forward. Now, again, I'd like to introduce our moderator for our next panel, Mr. Terrell D. Whitley. I usually read the bios, but this time I'm going to say, you guys read the bios. I'm just going to say we are joined by 2019 inductee of the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts, and Sciences, Mr. Terrell D. Whitley. Nothing else to be said. Come on, sir. Your panel, your show. Thank you, sir.
I appreciate it. Well, thank you, David. I appreciate it, and I'm excited to start this dialogue and conversation. And we have mics up front? Perfect. So welcome, everyone.
Welcome.
All right, that's my gauge. I was trying to see how sleepy we are. We're going to open this up, and we're going to get it a little bit exciting. We're going to have some dynamic conversation, and we have a great topic. We may slip it up and switch it up a little bit, so I want you to pay very close attention. Get your questions ready. We do like dialogue, so again, it's a little later in the day, so we're going to have some great conversation. And I'm blessed by having some panelists that I know, some new ones that I'm learning and I'm getting to know, but some people that I've been engaged with for many, many years. So this conversation could be a little bit more direct, lighthearted, and we can have some depth. Of course, the panel is on media industry D&I best practices, diversity, and inclusion. So we'll start off by really defining what that really means and what that looks like, and then we'll go much deeper into the overall conversation. So what I'd like to do first is just introduce our panelists, have them come up, say a few words about themselves, their history, any special nuggets they'd like to share, and then we'll jump right into the dialogue. Let me start by introducing a good friend and pal, someone I've known for several years. I've watched his career. I saw him as a young man, and he's still a little younger, but he's making mountains of movements within the industry, whether that is as a president of one company, moves to the president of another company, starts a new brand. This is Detavio Samuels. If you could, please welcome him to the stage. He is the president of I1 Digital, part of Urban One. Next up, I'd like to introduce Tanya Griggs Perara. Did I say that right? Close enough? She's the EVP of Comcast NBC Universal. I know Comcast NBC Universal very well, so I'm sure we're going to have some delightful conversation. Next up is someone that at one time was my boss, and she was our client, and she was good but tough. And so I'd like to introduce Ms. Lori Hall, who now is the Senior Vice President of Consumer Marketing at TV One. And then I'm so blessed on this panel to have a alumni of Florida A&M University. There we go. We got some rattlers in the house. One of the greatest universities on this campus, in the world, I should say. I am a 95 graduate, and I have Rashidi Hendrix, the president of Metallic Entertainment Group, that'll be joining us. All right. So let each panelist, I'd like for you I gave brief introductions. I'd like for you to take just literally 2 minutes, give our audience a little bit more in-depth knowledge of who you are, what you do, and some key nuggets of experience that you've had in your industry or your business. We'll start with Rashidi.
How's everybody doing? So I
am the president and founder of a company called Metallic Entertainment. And to sum up what we do, we are a talent management and production company. So in a way, to use Dante's reference, who was on the last panel, I like to use football analogies. If a talent is the player, I'm the head coach. So that's a way to kind of think about what we do. The majority of my clients are in the area of TV and film, and we work primarily with writers and directors. So one of the things that was important for me, being a former writer myself, was that I work with people who have diverse voices. I wanted to work with people who had different conversations. And I think that moving forward into this next phase of Hollywood, television, and film, we're starting to see a lot of people of color, right? But they oftentimes do not have people that not necessarily rep them the right way, and they don't necessarily come from that point of view. So that's where we kind of step in. My background was I actually started in the music industry on the campus of Florida A&M. I was a college rep and intern for a long time for Def Jam, and then worked with them later on in their office as a tour coordinator. So I used to coordinate all the tours. Fast forward, I moved into the music industry as a music publisher and an A&R, where I signed people like Fat Joe, Remy Ma, and Ice-T. I did a lot of publishing deals. And that actually is how I got into the film and TV side of things, because I managed a lot of our film and TV licensing. We talked about licensing before. So licensing is very important, and intellectual properties, and that kind of married into working in television, where I helped create a show at MTV called America's Best Dance Crew. So after that, I stayed in television and film, and produced multiple shows like Apprentice and Kitchen Nightmare. I shouldn't say Apprentice in this building, but and Shark Tank, and a lot of different series on network, working on Orange is the New Black for 2 years, and then started my business, where now I currently reside in New York and work out of New York and Los Angeles.
That was great. I know, right? I have to follow up that. Just say I'm Lori Hall, I'm out. My name is Lori Hall. I'm the head of marketing for TV One, which is based in Silver Spring, Maryland. And I came from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm actually a Northwestern University graduate. Go Wildcats. I started my career, I actually went to law school for a semester, hated it, quit. It was the best decision I ever made in my life. Sorry for anybody who's a lawyer. Still love you guys. Sorry. And then I went into TV production. So I started with being Bobby Brown, worked on that for several months, which was awesome because I got to be really close to Whitney in terms of a work capacity, so that was fun. And then I went on to Turner Broadcasting, and I was at TBS, TNT, and TCM, where at 23 I launched Tyler Perry's first television show and launched all of the subsequent ones after that. So that's how Terrell and I started working together, and I might be tough, but I was still cool, right? Yeah.
You were.
So I did that for years and worked with people like Jada Pinkett Smith and Cougar Town. I worked on both mainstream and African American targeted programming, and it led to my passion to really focus on African American content, which is why I'm at TV One today.
Oh, is this on? Yep. You can hear me? Okay. My name's Tanya Perara. I add my maiden name in there because I came from the music industry, and no one in music knows me as anything other than Tanya Grieg. So I have to make sure that people recognize it's still me. I am the executive vice president for film music at NBC Universal. NBC Universal is a Comcast company, hence the Comcast relationship. My background is almost entirely in the music industry. I spent 14 years prior to being at NBC Universal working for Interscope Records in a variety of capacities, both in a business affairs capacity and then in a business development capacity, where I focused a lot of our time trying to build businesses with our artists and other IP. It was during the time that we launched Beats by Dr. Dre and several other business units off of that. Left there, came to NBC Universal, where I started actually at Telemundo Enterprises, running their music department and doing a variety of other things, including producing the first Spanish language version of The Voice, La Voz Kids, and helping them enter into the reality competition music space. And from there, took over as head of business and legal affairs for film and television music across NBC Universal, which on the film side includes Universal Pictures, DreamWorks Animation Television. We have a non-theatrical production division called 1440 Enterprises. All of Illumination's output is through us on the animated side as well, and probably a bunch of other things I'm forgetting. And then over NBC, both broadcast cable and Telemundo.
All right, last one. How's everybody doing? Great. Good. So quick introduction, Detavio Samuels. I'll throw out my schools just in case anybody's in here. Duke, undergrad, Stanford grad school? No? Okay. Not like the Rattlers. No love. Yeah. Oh, I did? Hey, there we go. Did it for a reason. Post-business school, I worked at Johnson & Johnson. Did that for a couple of years. Left and went to Global Hue, which at the time was the #1 multicultural advertising agency in the country. Ran Global Hue for a couple of years, so we were doing business like Jeep, General Market, but largely in the multicultural space. Walmart, Chrysler, U.S. Navy, etc. Did a couple of deals. We did a deal with Beats by Dre, put a bunch of Beats speakers into Chrysler cars, and then marketed it all through music folks, Lenny Kravitz, will.i.am, etc. Anyways, that sets me on fire for this idea called branded entertainment. I was tired of making 30 seconds commercials that you guys didn't want to watch, and wanted to do cool stuff that people wanted to watch, but then could tell brand stories. So from there, I left and went to Urban One. Urban One, formerly Radio One, founded by Kathy Hughes. Alfred Liggins is our current CEO. There's 5 business units. There's a TV division, which Lori sits on. There's a national radio division, so I know you guys celebrated Tom Joyner yesterday, but Tom, Ricky Smiley, all of those folks sit on our platform. There's a local radio division, so y'all listen to whatever hip-hop stations in D.C., Baltimore, that's all us. And then I run the other 2. So I run essentially what is our creative agency and all the work that we do for brands, and then our digital media company, which supports the 60 brands that I just talked about. And then we have 8 of our own brands. Black Planet, who's on it? No? Well, there's still a lot of people on it. That's what I just want y'all to know. So we still have Black Planet. We've got a women's division with brands like Madame Noir and Hello Beautiful, a pop culture division with brands like Bossip and Global Grind. We have a men's channel as well as a news channel, News One, if you guys are familiar with that. So anyways, sitting at Urban One, responsible for all of the digital, all of the agency business, and any brands that want to work across all of the divisions. Very happy to be here. Y'all got to give us energy so we can give it back.
Yes.
Okay.
Fantastic. Give it up. Thank you. David did say I was a member of the Academy. I'm going to do a brief introduction, and then I'm going to kind of transition into my first question. So this panel is so powerful, and I'm thankful that I've had the opportunity to work with many of you all. I've run an agency called Liquid Soul for almost 18 years. Well, it is 18 years now. And we do film, television, and sports. We're the marketers behind 30 #1 films, 5 Academy films, and 150 other films that have grossed $3 billion. So if you saw Black Panther, if you saw Captain America, The Winter Soldier, if you saw 12 Years a Slave, Red Tails, Stomp the Yard, we had something to do with all of those films. We also launched major TV shows, and actually one of my former interns is here who actually participated in some of that work. We launched several shows for NBC Universal, including Celebrity Apprentice, The Voice, and a host of others, as well as we launched Blackish, Power, and many people know Empire. So film and TV, we've been a stakeholder in that space for a very long time. I'm going to tell you a quick story which helps me in the transitioning to our conversation. I forgot to mention, I'm also NAACP Image Award winner. Yeah, I like that. For a great film, if you're on Delta flights, check out Amazing Grace. That's Aretha Franklin's Amazing Grace. It's a great film, especially if you're on a flight to go to church, have a little church on a plane. But the story is I switched over, and I'm in this transition space in the film, and a lot of it had to do with Black Panther. How many people saw Black Panther? Right. So Black Panther makes $1 billion plus at the box office. And there was this interesting question that someone asked me. They said, hey, so who retired? Which Black person retired after Black Panther with all of the money that was made? And I was sad to say no one. I said Ryan Coogler is back on the next job. Chadwick Boseman, he's back out. Michael B. Jordan is shooting. The list goes on and on and on. And I began to think about the fact, while there was tremendous support in the marketplace, there really wasn't that much inclusion when it comes to the decision makings of Marvel and the people that ultimately makes the money, as well as Disney, which are both my clients. And it pressed on me to say, you know what, and Tyler Perry has said this many times, you can either be the person hammering the nails or the one owning the house. And I decided I had hammered a lot of nails. And now it was time for me to own the house, which is why I'm in this transition to being a filmmaker. I still own the agency, but now, as a matter of fact, I'm about to do a deal and own that house too. And so it takes me to this interesting dynamic, which I'm gonna transition that into what diversity and inclusion is all about, which sometimes we get confused when we hear the term. I've seen many people not exactly understand what D&I really is. Cynthia Marshall, anyone know who Cynthia Marshall is? Anyone? Okay, look her up. Cynthia Marshall is the president of the Dallas Mavericks. Dallas Mavericks had a very bad situation with their owner. Anyone know who the owner is? Mark Cuban. Anyone know what the issue was? It was sexual harassment. They had a boys club in Dallas at the Mavericks, straight up boys club. And it was a very difficult environment. There were many women that felt alienated. And so Cynthia Marshall, she defines D&I, diversity and inclusion, as diversity is when you have this mixture of players that now are part of the team, correct? So I got people from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, races, genders, they're part of the team. Inclusion is about who you put on the court. Who do you pass the ball to? How do they participate in actually winning the game? And so when she gave that analogy, it made tremendous sense to me. You can have a great team of diverse people, but you may not put all of those people in the game. They might not be the ones making decisions. So the first question to our audience, and this is why I like this, or to our panel, which is why I like the panel, we have decision makers. And so I'm gonna start with Lori in the area of marketing, because I know you lead that area. When you know, in making decisions, and as an African-American woman leading that department, how do you look at who steps to the plate, and how do you balance the equation when it comes to diversity and inclusion in your particular department?
Well, that's a great question. And I love the analogy. I've never heard that analogy before, so that's one that actually is going to stay imprinted in my mind. In terms of making sure that we balance things, my company, as well as myself, my boss, Michelle Rice, we all believe that good ideas come from anywhere. And that's something that I've always firmly believed. It doesn't matter if you're a coordinator, it doesn't matter if you're a manager, it doesn't matter if you're another executive. Good ideas come from anywhere. And so one of the things that I try to always do is invite more people to the table. If you notice, in certain meetings or in certain situations, a lot of the younger people might be nervous or scared to speak up. But it's up to the leaders, and it's up to me as the head of marketing to make sure that we give them an avenue to do so. We invite them to discuss, not only discuss, but also debate in a healthy way. I never want to be in a room of yes people. It is my team's job, it is our network's job to debate the issues so that we get to the best right answer, right? So that's one of the ways that I try to make sure to do that. But it really does come from the leadership that we have as well. They invite us to do those things. And I've learned along the way that sometimes you do have to push against your own judgment and then seek out others' opinions, because not every time is somebody going to say, hey, by the way, that was a bad idea. That actually is not going to work. I actually feel strongly. And if there's nothing that makes me matter is that when people leave the room, and then they talk crap about the idea. Right. No. The time was in the room. Talk about it now. Bring your opinion, and then let's figure out what's the best right answer, not when you go away and you talk to your friends behind closed doors. So that's one of the ways that I try to make sure that we always bring that diversity and inclusion to the table. It's not always about the people at the top. It's about making sure that you invite others and invite debate so that you have differences of opinion to lead to the best opinion.
Let's stay there for a second because it's a great topic. I have an experience to back it up. So we had a pitch for a client, and my head of brand strategy did not agree with the pitch. And he flat out on the phone call said, I wouldn't buy this, and I don't know why we're pitching it to the entire team. And I had to tell him, and I'm asking, I'll walk my way into this question. I said, you know what? Sometimes you got to figure out between the battles and wars of which battle you want to take on and how do you win the war. And in this particular scenario, I said, you know what? Let's hold this battle up on that particular issue, and maybe let's see how things play out. And then let's articulate kind of where the decision maybe can go by confidence and by, you get a certain level of buy-in. Would you say in those scenarios where you want people to speak up that also, is there a tactful way to do it, or is there some strategies that you would hope people would take and how they approach that? Because I think his approach at the time, not to say he was wrong, his approach on the call at that time I felt wasn't right.
Right. Now, I look at other people who do it well, like Detavio does this very well. Another one of our colleagues, Rashidi, does this very well. I think there's a tactful way to do it. I also believe at the end of the day, decisions have to be made. There should be a decision maker in the room who will say, this is the direction we're going in. Win or lose, we're going to go here. And that's okay. I think the important part is the discussion beforehand, but still doesn't mean that I'm going to bend to your opinion. I think there's a tactful way to do it. He probably had a very good relationship with you, which is why he felt very confident saying it on the phone in front of everybody. But I know you were probably like, wait a minute, hold up. Let's talk about this offline. That's always the cue. How many people could talk offline all the time? Talk offline. Let's talk offline. That's a tactful way to do it. But yeah, I think there's a way. You have to read the tea leaves. There are soft skills that people don't talk about in business that you have to have. You have to be able to intuit and what's going on in the room. I've been in a room with Detavio, and we're with our CEO, and I might be pushing for one thing, and Detavio is calling the plays like a head coach. He's like, hey, you got this one, but maybe not that point, so let's go with this. And it's like you just have to really try to understand people's motivations and figure out what's the best way for them to hear what you said. If I know Terrell doesn't like to be called out on a conference call publicly or disagreed with, then I might say, hey, T, because I would call him T. Hey, T, I have a different opinion about that. Maybe we should talk about that and see what's what, or what have you. There's a way for people to hear your opinion and you still to get it on the table, basically, is what I'm saying.
I agree.
Can I jump in on that? So I think for me, there's two things that you guys are talking about that I want to emphasize. One is the idea of choosing your battles. I can definitely say that as someone that's made content focused on Black culture and Black audiences, that's largely been purchased by brands who are driven by folks who don't look like us. A lot of the work that we've made isn't necessarily the work that we envisioned or the work that we wanted to make, right? When there's somebody else calling the shots, a lot of times it's their perception of your culture that they want to buy and not yours. So anyways, the reason I say all that is to say some stuff, everything's not going to be Black Panther, right? Sometimes you got to take some of those small hits. Those small hits allow you to feed your family, take care of talent, do all of these things. And then you just got to take those hits as they come. But then you also have to identify, when are the times that, it's time to go to war over this idea. I'll give you an example. Working for a Fortune 100 brand, they had come up with this idea that they wanted to reach Black people through a music video. That's my first trigger. The song was Meghan Trainor. It's all about that bass. That's my second one, right? And people were supposed to be dancing in the video, right? And so my teams are working on it, and it bubbles up to me, and I'm like, hold up, what's the idea? We're not doing that one. So anyways, I called the head of marketing over there. I'm like, you don't want to go viral for the wrong reasons. I don't want to be a part of it. We run radio stations. First call I make is to, in God we trust, everybody else bring your data. He's just not going to listen to me. I call our head of programming at radio. Have we ever played Meghan Trainor's It's All About That Bass on any of our radio stations? No, right? So I go back to the client. This is not going to work. We would have never done this, da-da-da-da-da. So that was the right battle to choose, and then you let some of the other smaller ones go away. The other thing that I think that's important in that is that we are creating safe spaces for the people at the table to have the conversation. So as you're talking about about inclusion, it doesn't matter what title is. People need to feel free to voice whatever is going on. So his first reaction to me is, but there were this black person was in the meeting, and this black agency's in the, and this black, right? Why did none of them step up? Like, they had already paid for the rights to the video, to the music, all of that. Right? Why did nobody step up? And I just said, okay, do me a favor. Go grab those 3 people one-on-one, pull them in the corners, and then ask them. And sure enough, each one of them were like, yeah, I don't feel comfortable, right? It's not a good idea. But in the meeting, in the space where the CMO is like, that's a great idea, and the VPs are like, that's a great idea, nobody was going to speak up. So anyways, the 2 pieces that I want to bring up are just about diversity and inclusion is, 1, we need to be smart, make sure that we're choosing the right battles and fighting for the right things. Everything shouldn't be a battle. And then 2, we need to make sure that we are creating safe spaces for even the smallest voice, the youngest voice, the lowest title to have a point of view, so that we don't end up in places that we shouldn't end up.
That's fantastic, fantastic. Tanya, so I was part of the Comcast NBC Universal merger. We were actually the agency of record for NBC Universal at the time, and one of the things that we all learned is there becomes a difference in culture. And sometimes you may exist in one culture, this is a corporate culture, and another corporate culture comes into play, and their culture is different. And their culture may supersede based on the deal structure, and so there's our adjustments that have to be made over time. And sometimes it falls out. You begin to see things which are obvious. For example, they change leadership, or they may adjust where you actually work. They say, hey, we're going to move to our office. We're going to integrate you in. But then there's also there's these other pieces of it which are a little bit more soft, which is how we engage and do work, and how do we do things collectively as one. I'd love for you to give us some thought capital. I mean, as you guys kind of went through that particular process and how that may have unfolded a little bit for you.
Well, the Comcast merger happened before I joined the company, but my entire career has been one way or another involved with Universal. Mm-hmm. So I had a front row seat, even though I wasn't. So to take a step back, for those who didn't know, I started at Interscope Records, which is a Universal Music Group division, in 1999. In 1999, Universal Studios and Universal Music were co-owned by Vivendi. So we were all one big happy company and had been for a very long time. And we had a particular culture and a way of doing things back then when we were all co-owned. NBC enters the picture in 2004. NBC purchases the studios, has no interest whatsoever in the music properties, and says no thank you. So we split ways in 2004, and now Universal Music and Universal, including the publishing division, Universal Music Group, on the record side, Universal Music Publishing, are no longer under co-ownership at all. In fact, they license the right to use the Globe, the actual trademark, from us. So we are actually completely separate companies now. Then since then, after NBC came in and bought the studios, then GE came in, and then after that, Comcast comes in. And so this is not particularly shocking. It's not news to anybody who's familiar with corporate America. This happens. And to your question, it's pretty common at this level of the game at a major studio where there's a new owner in town every 5 to 10 years at times, right? So I hear a lot of talk about the difference in company culture under GE and with Comcast. And I think it all depends on who you talk to. When I look at diversity and inclusion, for example, I look at it from 2 perspectives, being within a major corporation. One is, what does your workforce look like, and what are you doing to host a diverse and an inclusive atmosphere within the people that are working at the company, the decision makers, the people that get to determine who we're going to hire, that get to determine what's on screen, what gets made, how things are marketed. And then there's also a question of what that content is, and is that content, in fact, diverse as well, and representing a diverse and inclusive value structure. So I think that there's some thought that under the Comcast leadership, that there has been more diversity and inclusion on both of those fronts. There are countless ways I could tell you I've seen it, but again, I'm not comparing it to an environment I worked in before as directly as some other people would have. But I've seen it when Donna Langley took leadership of filmed entertainment. She made, I think, a really important decision in deciding to take a movie like Straight Outta Compton and market it as a general market film and not as a niche film. That, to me, was ground shifting. That was very, very, that was a powerful decision. It was a difficult decision, meaning, you know, no one should assume that it was met with agreement across the board and that everybody bought in and said, yeah, of course, a story about NWA can translate internationally and can translate to non-black audiences. That's absolutely not what happened. And in fact, we were at least the third studio that ended up actually taking the picture after it went into turnaround multiple other places for that, you know, and other, but that was one of the reasons. Other studios didn't buy into the fact that this was something that could be marketed globally or outside, even in the United States, of a black audience. That was proven to, in fact, be true. But that started, you know, and since then, with that particular executive, I have seen and we have seen a real sense of leadership, both in terms of what our workforce looks like and in terms of what decisions are being made, whether it's spearheading female directors, whether it's, you know, what decisions are being made to make sure that on screen and in the executive workplace that we're being as diverse and inclusive as possible. And I think that translates over to NBC as well. So what we have seen is a proliferation of diversity and inclusion plans and practices that are you know, exploding. Could that also be a sign of the times? Could that also have something to do with the fact that the Me Too movement and all, you know, yes, it absolutely could. You know, did that environment predate that? Comcast, NBC Universal likes to believe that it did. Have we seen a lot? I have a laundry list. I actually brought my iPad for data in case anybody wanted data. But I did roll my eyes at data, but I'm like, oh, Lord, in case anyone asks me questions about data, I'll be prepared because I don't tend to run around with numbers in my head. But when I look at, and it's a laundry list of initiatives and programs that we have to spearhead diverse producers, directors, writer programs, all sorts of things internally, accountability measurements, many of them date back within the past 3 years.
They do.
And so I think that under the present leadership, we've definitely seen a commitment to diversity and inclusion. I think it's looking at what that means and how that's being implemented and what will make it stick once this is no longer the conversation of a du jour on everybody's lips, you know, because of the sign of the times.
So here's something to consider, and I know a lot of large companies, specifically NBC, Comcast, NBC Universal, they were held to an MOU, a memo of understanding regarding diversity and inclusion. And I also know, I read the MOU, I saw it when it was being crafted. Some of the things they executed, some things have taken several years for them to cross the threshold. The great thing is, like, we have Clio, and I was going to get to this question. I'll still get to it a little bit later, but BET Her, we have other channels that are now being focused on women, specifically African-American women. And those MOUs, and really all the measurements that they look at take a tremendous amount of time sometimes to capture, to realize, to study, to analyze, to say that we're now producing a diverse and inclusive environment. But the challenge, I'm gonna tell you what the real challenge is the continuity of that culture and environment. Because when leadership changes, everything changes. And recently, as you guys look at different companies, and this is more on the corporate side, you know, I've seen Walmart, for example, go through what they call Black Flight, and several top leaders, executives have left. Disney, a lot of your content creators at Disney that produce African-American content, they've left for Netflix. So there's always shifts and changes, and when it happens, the key now is how do you, and NBC.
We've absolutely, we refer to Netflix as NBC East.
That's correct. That's correct. So the environment changes fast. Rashidi, I'm shift again, and while I'm asking Rashidi, I want you to get your questions. I'm going to open up the floor, and if you guys can line up, we're going to ask a few questions as well. After the member.
Can I just privilege? We have been joined by the Honorable Sheila Jackson Lee from Texas. And I hate to do this, but I know she has to rush back to her panel, so I'm not going to ask her to stay any longer. But so glad to have you. Could you just say a couple words?
Yeah, I am. It will be unusual in brevity. Let me thank the panelists, Terrell. We meet again. I had a lovely evening last evening, but anyhow, to MMCA, I just want to welcome you to the United States Congress, and in particular on the crucial issues. I got just a snippet. We've just come out of a classified briefing, and I'm getting ready to go to the floor and debate issues dealing with changes in presidential language because women candidates are running. So we do things like that, changing laws to match the fact that women candidates are running plural, and a woman candidate may win the presidency of the United States of America. So we're on the floor. We're on the floor dealing with the stress of law enforcement officers. And the only reason I cite the myriad of things that we do that seem in contrast is because information is gold to us. Information is gold to the American people. And when minorities are involved in the disseminating of that information, when you are the holders of the First Amendment, there is a confidence level that rises for the recipients, i.e. Tom Joyner's story of his life, and the fact that when he told people to go to the doctor, people from our community, brown and black people, men and women, they went. When he told people to vote, they went. So I am most grateful. I started back in Houston, back in Texas, with the first early ownership of TV stations by African Americans. That happened back in the late 80s. And of course, it went in a cycle. They owned, and then they didn't own. And part of it was advertising and diversity, and now where you are makes it very valuable. I will just end on this note because I do many things, but I think this effort along the many things and committee assignments that I have is one that I've taken to heart because it has had such a rough journey of ridicule and ridiculous analysis. And that is, of course, H.R. 40, which is the Commission to Study Reparations. And I have taken it up because I view it as a historical fact that I would like African Americans, whether they agree or disagree, and more are agreeing, to understand and to know how to present it to those who would raise questions of its seriousness. And we are just moved by the scholars that are there who've never been given an opportunity to be heard, doing actual research, Terrell, actual research, powerful research. And you, the vehicles of messaging, we welcome you giving the opportunity for a story like that to be heard, even if the only story you tell is the 250 years of slavery and the fact that we built the very place that you're sitting in, and as well, we made Cotton King, and that was the money, that was the cash that was utilized by the Wall Street banks and otherwise. So I'll just leave you with that story. I won't go further. And the indicting part of this story of reparations is a professor made the point that in Boston, the gap wealth is a wealth family, white family has $247,000 in wealth, and a black family has $8. On that note, I was getting ready to take your equipment. On that note, I can't thank you enough for the information you share to educate, and I am 100% with you on the corporate partners that are here that have worked with you, but also the idea of advertising, no matter what medium you are on, social media, outright cable and television networks, advertising, investing in your companies and in the African American media community. So thank you, Mr. David Morgan, for your excellent leadership. Thank you all. God bless all of you. God bless the United States of America.
Congresswoman, can I indulge you, please, one picture with our panel while you're here, please? Do you mind?
And my gavel didn't come down, but I tried to be under a certain amount. know that's unusual.
So what a blessing it is when we have these MMCA events and we get an opportunity to hear from our legislators. So we want to thank you, Representative Sheila Jackson-Lee, for coming in and providing us some critical information. We wish you the very best as you go and you fight for our rights and you fight for our reparations as well as everything else on the floor. So we pray a special blessing over your life and your living.
Proud of your production, then I'm going to be right on the red carpet if you give me the word.
Absolutely. You on there?
Production coming up. Thank you, Terrell.
Indeed.
We spoke this morning, I hope. Or
Oh, yes, we will. We will.
Thank you so very much.
Take care. But it is a great honor to have our members come and speak to us. Let me get back to the conversation. I got a few more questions. Prepare your questions. We're going to get some dialogue going here very quickly. Rashidi, I wanted to come to you to talk a little bit around some of the transitions that I know you've seen. As you've heard, Rashidi was a writer. He's participated on what I would consider to be multiple sides of the table, meaning he's participated on the creative side, he's participated on the executive side, he's also had the placement side, and so he's seen the level of inclusion and diversity from different angles. So I'd like for you to talk to us about what some of those challenges and differences have been, and then what are some of the decisions that you personally have made that have kind of helped move you to where you are today in your career, especially in representation? Because I know what that takes. It takes a lot to represent others, to help them walk through some of those closed doors.
Yeah, I think for the first part, I think that there's definitely been a great movement that we're in right now. And shows like Atlanta, Insecure, there's a lot of great content out there. And right now, in the eyes of the distributors and the buyers, we're the flavor of the month. Mm-hmm. We came off of the Oscar So White. Now we're into the, hey, Black Panther worked. Straight Outta Compton worked. Let's get us, I can't even tell you, as a rep, how many even agents have come to me and say, tell me you got a Black woman director. I need one. So there is a need and an interest in, and I'm not going to say that there's not an interest in our content, but I think there's definitely an interest in our voice. Meaning that they want us in the room now. And it's not necessarily the feeling that, well, we just want you in the room to fill this quota or to just to say, well, at least we have a Black director now, so we're good. It really is a genuine interest because I can tell you that I've gotten into arguments with buyers, and that's not usually what I do, just so you know. But what I mean is that, we've talked about how, for instance, what you spoke about earlier about feature films and projects that may have been more leaning people of color about how they don't work overseas or they don't work in this place or they don't work in that place. And, when you see a Black Panther and a lot of other films come out, regardless of whatever you think, my, 90-year-old Jamaican grandmother who went to see Black Panther doesn't know nothing about a comic book. She went to see it because it was a cultural movement. And, the truth is that I kind of feel like right now there is a lane for creators of color, but your content still has to be good. It still has to be right. It still has to be packaged. And I use that word lightly, packaged, but it has to be there, and I think the voice that's attached to it is what they're buying into.
Yeah, one of the challenges that we see constantly is the fact that they're between Black-owned media, non-Black-owned media, and where you get the green light. Where do you really get those opportunities for our content to shine, and what type of mandates will our creators put in place? So this is two specific types of initiatives. There's number one, we have to keep and maintain and support the TV1s, the BETs, the Bounce networks. We want them to deliver qualified level content that we will watch. But then we also have our creators, and I love the fact that many of them are now implementing writers and diversity and inclusion writers to ensure that we are at the table. So when Ava DuVernay comes in and says, I want all of my directors to be African American.
Jordan Peele too.
And Jordan. Or when one of the things I like about Spike curates all of the music surrounding his TV shows, and it's all urban or old school hip hop.
Well, on the creative side of the network, I think diversity and inclusion seems like a great idea, but how is it really implemented? And I think that, if you guys don't know, ABC, NBC, CBS all have diversity writing programs or diversity directing programs or diversity acting programs. They actually are committed to the conversation, but it's also about placement, because you can go through the program, but are you going to get staffed on a show? You can go through the program, but are you going to get booked on a, as an actor on the gig? You know what I mean? Like where does it go after that? And I think for maybe about 10 years when they had these programs, it was very much kind of sprinkled,
But let's talk about it for a second, because you're right. I've seen those programs. I've participated in the one at NBC.
Yeah, I did the one at Fox.
Yeah.
So I actually was in the Fox program.
And you're right. Part of it is when you come out, many of them are saying, what's next? And that's the part, between building your credits, but then having the opportunity, which in my opinion, I would love to see more Black-owned distribution and owned networks where we can go. Right now, how many Black people can put a movie out in theaters? What studios are putting out of color are consistently putting movies in theaters? Does anyone know? Right. 0. There's one studio that's owned by a Black man. Do you know who that is? So Tyler owns a physical studio.
He owns a sound stage.
Right. I'm talking. Right. He owns sound. I'm talking about an entertainment studio. Now, what Tyler has is phenomenal.
I guess Byron Allen?
Byron Allen.
Yeah.
Byron Allen. But Byron hasn't put out African American content yet.
Yeah, that's a whole nother story. But
That is.
But what I mean, I think part of it is that, I think what Byron is doing is he may be setting up something, and
I'm working on the first film.
Yeah, exactly. So I think he's setting up, a play that is going to probably be inclusive of, putting out that type of art or type of content. So, but to answer the other part of your question about representation, I'm probably maybe one of about 20 managers that focus primarily with writers and directors. So, our task is very different than repping actors because we're literally in the fray of buyers that want content. And, that's a big part of what we do is we package, we sell, we create jobs for our clients. And, the diversity landscape, because it's a big part of my practice is working with diverse writers and directors is definitely has come along more where I would say that a lot of our clients are getting asked to do more work, where before it was, okay, well, I think we have our diverse voice in our writer's room right now, which is crazy. So.
But why is that?
I think now, like you said, I think Ava and Kenya and a lot of people like Shonda Rhimes who are showrunners have made those decisions, because before that it was the current executives at the networks and studios that basically made those decisions of who got in the room. So now it's more or less, I think, like I have a really good friend who just got a job on Billions, which is probably one of the greatest shows on TV right now, in my opinion. But he came from working on Power. So what was it that made him eligible to work on Billions is that he was an incredible writer, an incredible producer, and I think that they were interested in this particular moment to say, you know what, we want to bring somebody in who has a different perspective.
And I'm gonna say this final thing, then we'll come to you, Tanya. I would beg to differ that our content, unilaterally has proven to drive more eyeballs, more dollars, and more revenue. The largest film franchise to date, which is Fast and Furious, is completely culturally driven. So, and every studio, I want you to hear this, every studio, every network, they know it. Tyler Perry and what he did and other, they know what Will Packer does. They all know. So then why isn't it more aggressive? And I would tell you it's because who's making the decisions. It boils down to who's in the chair at the time that says yes. That part really, really matters. I think we have to make a quick pause because we have a member of Congress here that we would like to have come up. I'm sorry. Oh, hey.
Good afternoon again. Y'all having a good time? Yeah. Again, thank you all so much for being here. Our amazing moderator here and panel. It's been a really, really good day. I want to pause for just a moment as the honorary host to recognize one of my colleagues, member of Congress, who has done a lot of work in this space. He comes from the state of Georgia, and I think you all were just talking about that. He's a member of the Media Diversity Caucus, and I'm just honored to recognize Congressman Hank Johnson from Georgia. And I'm going to ask him to greet you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My pleasure to stand before you today as a member of Congress, as a young boy growing up on the streets of Washington, D.C. And when I say on the streets, I mean I had a good family, but I chose to go in a certain direction. It's kind of like I had to go through the rite of passage that we go through as black males. And I wouldn't take anything for that experience. But coming up that way in the public school system of Washington, D.C., which was then known as Chocolate City, and then being able to escape from Washington, D.C. to go to Atlanta, Georgia to attend HBCU, Clark College, now known as Clark Atlanta University, and to go through 4 years and then directly into law school down in Houston, Texas, Thurgood Marshall School of Law, Texas Southern University, HBCU, get my law degree, pass the bar in Texas, pass it in Georgia, start my law practice, taking court appointments, $25 a pop, working for 27 years as a criminal defense lawyer, and then becoming a congressman in the United States of America, and coming back home is truly a great experience for me, and I represent what's possible for African Americans. I have lived the American dream. Now, my story would not be something that we would hear or see about looking at it through the lens of traditional media. If you think back, 2016, all of the films for the nominations for what, the Oscars, yeah, not a single minority in the whole program. That's 2016. That's just 3 years ago. Since then, there's been a lot of advancement in terms of diversity in front of the camera and behind the camera also. I'm happy to have been a small part of that when I started the Caste Caucus here in Congress, which is a bipartisan caucus for the advancement of studio talent and film diversity. And we've held several panels like this one that Representative Demings is hosting today. She's done a tremendous job of advancing this very important issue, which is diversity in the media. There cannot be too many of us concerned about this and working on this, because too long we have gotten the wrong images of ourselves. The images that we've seen are of non-achievement and of negativity. And that kind of puts something in our psyche that we pass down through generations and it leads to us collectively needing to sit down on the psychiatrist's couch for some counseling. That's where our collective psyche is. And so when we're able to start promoting more positive images of us, and it requires us to be in front of the camera, but also behind the camera, making production decisions, making monetary investment decisions. You know, it calls for us to be on all levels and on all strata of what it takes to produce these images and put them before the public. We need to be in that, and we're not to the extent that we need to be, but we're making great progress. So I want to thank Representative Val Demings for pushing this issue along. I support her in her efforts. I support you all in everything that you all are doing, and I'm happy to be here today, and I'm happy to see so many of us in attendance. So thank you so much.
Thank you for being so gracious.
Sure. Again, we want to thank Representative Val Demings, who is our gracious host. Thank you so much for giving us this platform and opportunity. We also want to thank you, Representative Hank Johnson, for coming by, telling us more about your story and the importance of what it is we're doing and how it impacts those that come behind us. So we'll take a quick picture, then we'll jump right back into our Q&A, into our dialogue.
Oh, no, please, please, please. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. Hold up. All right, look here. Big smile. One more, big smile. 1, 2, and next.
And last one right here, bro. And 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. All right, thank you.
All right, Tanya, I know you had some comments. I hope you didn't forget.
No,
Go
I
ahead.
didn't forget, and I have to apologize to everybody in the room. I am going to unfortunately have to run out of here very shortly. I have to catch a plane back to Los Angeles in a very short time. I won't tell you how short because it will stress everybody out for me. So, but trust me, I'll make it. What I was going to say, actually piggybacking on your very thorough and thoughtful comments, is when it comes to this conversation of kind of what next, and the fact that we do have all of these, look, having the initiatives, you know, the diversity initiatives is fantastic. The idea behind having them, and all the studios do, and frankly have developed more and more, is to foster access to a system that is, you know, when it comes to the major studios, routinely thought of and validly so as denying access to anybody who's not already within the system, who doesn't already have those relationships, have those connections. It's kind of renowned in the industry that to get in, and I would say it does to some degree apply across media, to be honest with you. Television, film, even music to a certain extent, slightly different beasts there, but to a certain extent, talent alone isn't enough. How do I get through the door, right? So that's the idea behind a lot of these initiatives, and while they're rolling and they have them every year, and in some cases maybe even more than once per year, the classes are relatively small, so you know you're still talking about a relatively small number of people that are getting into that program, and that's also with good reason. But the thing that needs to happen once you know it's the very analogy you talked about from the very beginning, the difference between diversity and inclusion. So what happens after that is as much of an imperative on companies such as mine. And so one of the dialogues that I think is starting to happen now, both at the executive level as well as at the talent level, is where does this element of quote sponsorship and or mentorship come into play, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is something that is often absent from the conversation at the corporate level and needs to be. You know, we started off with talking about diversity, and then everyone said, well, what about inclusion? Because now you're hiring people, but you're not giving them a seat at the table, right? So now diversity and inclusion is the new catchphrase that everybody is buying into, and hiring executives to be in charge of and all of that. But I think, again, the point still needs to be made that, okay, well, you might be inclusive by saying, okay, well, we're going to have the following. We look at, for example, in our metrics, we'll look at how many executives of color, female and executives of color, rise above the VP level, right? That's one metric of inclusion. How high are those people going? The higher that you get, the whiter and more male is going to start to look. How many people of color and women do you have on your boards, right? Those are metrics that tend to show that the industry isn't moving quite in the direction that they want everybody to believe that they are, right? When you start looking at that and going, how many people are in those decision-making, seats that they can actually greenlight a show, that they can actually make decisions on who gets hired. So it's great that you're increasing on your diversity and now potentially on your inclusion. But my question, if you ask me where I sit today, both, that I ask as an executive of color and a female executive of color within a major institution like mine is, what are you doing to ensure that those people get placed? What are you ensuring to ensure that those executives rise through the ranks? Well, what do they need? They need sponsorship, to be very honest with you. They need somebody who not just says, okay, now you're in the room, but I actually believe in your work and I'm going to champion you. Or actually, I'm going to take you outside of the room afterwards and explain to you that how you challenge this person on a call ain't the way to do it. How do you know that? How do you know that if you're just coming in and this is your first job? There was somebody, and I'm sorry I'm running on,
No, you're
because
fine. You gotta go.
I'm gonna have to hit the bricks fairly soon. Somebody had asked a question in the prior panel as well about, how do you know about these things? How do people, if you didn't grow up, you feeling like you're behind because everybody else kind of grew up in the industry. When I'm one of those rare people, I grew up in Los Angeles. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and I grew up around industry. My parents are not in the industry. My father's a physician. My mother is a therapist. But through one means or another, I had more exposure than most black kids specifically did at my age to the industry. I knew that doing what I do was a job. I knew that was a thing that I could do. I knew other people who did it. They didn't necessarily look like me, but I knew that that was something to aspire to. When I look at my child, she's 8, and I look at her peer group, there are tons of kids, none of whom look like her, but their parents are producers and directors and writers, and that's what they do. And so they do. I mean, that was a valid comment. They absolutely grow up in it. They know the vernacular. They know it. It's in their blood well before they get to college and then before they get into the workforce. So in effect, they do have a leg up. So getting those programs to provide that, right? So the access of opening the door is one thing, but how does it get into your blood? How do you know how you're supposed to comport yourself as an executive? How do you know what decisions to make? How do you know which battles to fight? When is it time to fight, and when is it time to not fight? Sponsorship. Somebody who's actually, I like the word sponsor rather than a mentor, but somebody who's actually saying, I don't want to say responsible for you, but let me show you how it's done. Let me show you how this is done. Mentorship, sponsorship, whatever word you need to use, that to me is the connective tissue that takes inclusion to that next level, where you're then seeing more people at the SVP, at the EVP level. As I have been promoted, believe me, I've spent countless times, countless hours with young women, young executives of color, young people coming up who have just reached out saying, all right, well, here's what I can tell you over coffee. Here's what I can tell you. Oh, here's what I can tell you, because how else are they going to know? How else are they going to know? And to some degree, wherever I got it from, it is my imperative, and the reason I'm here and the reason I sit in the chair that I sit in instead of at one of your companies, at least right now. That could all change. That could all change. But part of it is because it's somebody smarter than me said in an earlier panel, somebody has to be. You want a Comcast, NBC, Universal to have people like me at those levels and at those thresholds. So while we need the Black-owned, companies, and we need more of them, and we need more of that content. We also need to make sure that these companies that really aren't going anywhere, right, and are getting bigger and are acquiring more and gobbling up more of the ecosystem that we're all working within, we need to make sure that they're accountable as well. We need to make sure that they care once the hot button issue is no longer diversity and inclusion or Time's Up or whatever the issue is. We need to make sure that they continue to hire all of us to greenlight our shows. And so in order to do that, to some degree, I have an imperative not only to stay, but then to make sure that the people that do get in the door understand how that system works and how to succeed within it.
Totally agree. Great feedback. Can we thank Tanya? I know she has to run out. I want to thank you, Tanya. I don't know if when you got to leave, but I want to thank you. Yeah, come on. Okay. And I want to highlight just a couple things that Tanya have stated, because it's very critical comments around mentorship and sponsorship. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
I think the greatest point is you got to figure out, especially in the corporate side, how do you pull other people into the spectrum of leadership? And when we do have people that rise to a level of senior vice president, executive vice president, how do we give them that opportunity? Or how do they also create the access of opportunities to bring other people up and give them that type of information that helps them rise in the organization? I remember one of the things I do, like I said, I've owned my business for several years, but before that, I was an executive at SAP, and I got to a point where I was unapologetically Black. I started hiring people like it was nobody's business. I hired 60 folks in probably a span of 6 months, and these were all African Americans. I knew that I had already started Liquid Soul. I knew I was leaving, but not just hiring them, but then I would have closed door sessions to help them understand the environment. I would help them understand the ropes to know and the ropes to skip. I wanted them to be aware of what success looks like and what it does not. And then I carry that over into my corporate, my entrepreneurship. So Alonda Thomas, who's here, who's now at Howard University, also was my PR director. And I talked about Khadijah, who was one of our PR interns. And having, I feel blessed to have brought so many other people into the industry, which is the same thing that Tyler Perry does, what TV One does, what Urban One does, what Rashidi does, is we actually bring people into the industry and give them open doors. Can you guys, either any person can answer this, talk about how you've worked with, and I've been part of some of that work. And I want you to talk about kind of your process and engage in that. And I do want to acknowledge Representative Clyburn, who just left. He just stepped out. He may come back, but I will be sure to acknowledge him when he comes in. But I'd like for one of you to talk about kind of how you've helped mentor and or steward other young executives into decision-making roles.
So I'm gonna play around with that question in a couple of ways. I think in terms of the conversation we're having, there are 4 buckets that I think about. It sounds like we're all feeling like there's relatively good progress on the talent side, seeing Black and brown people on screen. There's progress on the maker side, so who are the people actually producing and doing the work, and where the value is, or where we've yet to see real movement, is who gets the green light and who owns. So I'll talk about ownership, because that's a thing that's really important to me, and then I'll let you guys talk about mentorship. At I1, we are currently doing deals with the long tail of Black content creators. So not the people that Amazon or Netflix or any of them are paying attention to. We're looking at people who have great numbers on YouTube, who can prove that they make great content, can prove that they have audiences, and trying to give them deals. What's really important to me is that we are not appropriating the culture or just taking from them. I believe that the people who are the creators and the makers deserve to benefit economically from their genius. And so the deals that we make, I'm pretty sure that when I leave, someone's going to go behind me and unravel all of the deals. But my team knows that my spirit needs to show up in every single one of these deals. And so when we do work with content creators and makers and people of color, every single one of them, they're not getting 10%, they're not getting 20%, they're not getting 30%, they're getting numbers that are bigger than all of that. Because it's important for me to make sure that they can make money, benefit, and do it again. And that's something that I just think Again, too many of us are missing on the ownership side, right? So it's all about the conversation you started in the beginning with Black Panther. Too many of us are getting dollars, not real deals, right? And so we're trying to make sure people get deals and that they can benefit economically. If your work performs, you should make money. I should make money, yes, but you should make money as well.
You know what, Detavio, what's interesting is a lot of content creators don't even know what a deal looks like.
And that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's up to us to actually help people understand what their deal should look like. A good friend of mine had a reality show. Actually, he's a politician. Anyway, he was going on a reality show, and he didn't know what to ask for in his deal. And so he sent me the contract. He's a lawyer and a politician, but he sent me the contract because I have experience in the entertainment industry, and I literally guided him through the deal. And it wasn't what was in the deal that was problematic. It's what's not in the deal that's problematic, the things he didn't know to ask for because it wasn't showing up on the paper. And that's how we all help each other. I remember when we were working together, you know, I would share specific information because I want Terrell to win, and he is winning, right? But I wanted to make sure that I hired Black-owned agencies, not just agencies that did Black work. I wanted to make sure that if I felt there was a skill set that could help them acquire even more business, that I shared what other people were doing and submitting so they understood how to compete out there. And that goes for any agency I worked with. So I think it's really important. It's almost like supplier diversity, but we have to do it ourselves sometimes. There's not a Toyota type supplier diversity for entertainment, but there should be. Teach people how to pitch. Teach people what they're up against when they're submitting things, because what you don't know is half the battle. Right? And in terms of the mentorship piece, we were fortunate enough to have Alonda with us at TV1 too. So when I saw Liquid Soul, I was like, yes, she's excellent. So hi, Alonda. But my mentorship or sponsorship doesn't just extend internally. I think that when young people, or anybody actually, and it's not always young people, sometimes they're peers. They'll say, well, how do you do this? How can I get this done? How can I get this stakeholder to buy into what I'm saying? I always meet with them. And then when people from the outside hit me up, whether it's on LinkedIn or somebody's friend of a friend or child or whoever, I never say no to a conversation. Detavio is the same way. He said, I never say no, because had it not been for people who helped me, I wouldn't be here. And I want to extend myself as much as I can to those who are interested and want a seat at the table, who want to get into the industry, who need help understanding. I think that's my purpose in terms of all the blessings I've been given to be in this industry at this level. So anybody that reaches out to me, I'm always there for. And I think that's a thing that most of us probably do.
Yeah, well, I think, Rashidi, people, and I want you to hit on this, a lot of people don't know about representation. There's so many people that send scripts to me, or I'll meet someone and say, hey, I wrote a script 6 years ago, and I want you to read my script. And I'm like, I don't want to read your script. I don't, and honestly, it's not that there's a liability in me reading that script. And so, and that's not just with me. That's with Will Packer. That's with Tyler Perry. That's with Malcolm Lee. That's with anyone at a network. Sometimes they don't, unless it comes through a qualified source of representation. And when you represent writers, producers, directors, that gives you the entryway, because Rashidi's relationships, we know a lot of the same people. If Rashidi calls my office and says, hey, T, I got a script I want you to read, that call jumps to the top of my list, because I know it's already been qualified by Rashidi. I know a lot of people don't know what that actually looks like and what that means to have representation.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I was very happy about when I came into the TV and film industry was it was very different than the music industry, because, you know, you always hear the word manager being thrown around. You always hear that. But a lot of times in the music industry, it just meant their cousin, or, you know, what I used to call my mans and them, management.com, you know. It was just really like a word. But, you know, on our side of the industry, now I feel like representation means a lot more. And it's also the gateway to get to a buyer. You know, while a buyer might love you and they may have a great relationship with you, they don't necessarily want to talk to you about deal points. Nope. They don't want to talk to you about what you should get or what you shouldn't get, because they want to have that creative relationship with you. So working in the representation field allows you to have the vetting that we spoke about, and it also allows you to have the opportunity to be repped in a way where you don't have necessarily direct access, but you have somebody who's vouching for you. And, you know, I'm actually part of a collective called Diverse Representation. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it before, but it's a really great, you should check out their website. And it's basically pretty much all of the reps of color in Hollywood, you know, and they have publicists, they have agents, managers, sports agents, and we all are on there and available to you know, have a different perspective. But I think, you know, for a lot of people of color, the assumption is that you don't, if you work with a rep of color, then your deals may not be right. I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but there's a big assumption of that, you know, is that, oh, I have to go over to this type of lawyer or this type of rep. But, you know, we're out here closing deals. You know, we're doing deals. And, you know, truthfully, my buddy Rich Paul, I don't know if you guys know who he is, but you know, he reps LeBron and probably like 25 other athletes. He's doing it right now. Killing it. And, you know, the truth is that, you know, he is the guy who literally is closing all the deals for every NBA player.
While you guys approach the mic for questions, Rashidi, talk about the difference between an agent and a manager.
Well, I would say that a manager, in a lot of ways, is somebody that you'll be with for a long extended time, and an agent is somebody you may be with for a shorter time. And I'm just saying that to say that managers are a little bit more hands-on in regards to the day-to-day and development of your career. So somebody comes to me and says, hey, I'm a director and my goal is I want to produce a Marvel film. Then what I do is I help build that roadmap to the Marvel film. And what we do is we bring in agents to work with us that book them for those different jobs. Exactly. So we're more on the career side, where the agent is really more of a booker. You know, their job is to secure the jobs, because as an agent, they're what you call a bonded, and so they're allowed to actually secure work for you, whereas managers are not. And managers also produce as well. So
great. I think it's helpful to know the difference when someone is a content creator. To have a manager is someone, like Rashidi said, that'll help you craft your particular career, but having an agent or working with agents can help you connect with deal flow. I work on both sides of the fence. I work with tremendous amount of agents with WME, CAA, you may have heard of them, UTA, that's on the film and television side. But then I also deal with several managers. Also on a team, usually you may have a publicist, which would help craft kind of their image. So developing a team, I think, becomes important over time. And just so you know, some of the filmmakers that you guys are engaged with now, they started in those areas. Ava DuVernay was a what? Yes. She was a publicist. Charles King was what?
An agent.
He was an agent. So those particular areas help us lead towards tremendous deal flow. I'd like to take a pause right now and recognize Representative Clyburn. We'd love to have you come and give us some words. And thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you very much. I really came down to see my longtime friend, Bob Brown, who I understood was gracing us with his presence here today. Then I ran into Eddie, where's Eddie? With whom I sometimes barter on Morning Joe or some other show. But just to say to all of you how much we appreciate your commitment to helping us get this country back on the right track. I talk often about last year as we were getting ready to embark upon what many of us knew was going to be a significant, in fact, I call it a very consequential election. And in preparation for it, I sat down with my media person, Hope Derrick, who was with me for years, for about 10 years, and then around 8 years ago, she decided to go out and join you guys and make some money. But then when I became whip again, I enticed her to come back and to help me launch this second attempt at getting the things right for the country. We were sitting down discussing a book that I read when I was in high school. It might have been college. A book written by Alexis de Tocqueville, Democracy in America. And if you read that book, the one line in the book that stood out for me was a line where he wrote, America is not great because it is more enlightened than any other nation, but rather because it has always been able to repair its faults. And that's what makes this country great. This country does not have to be made great again. It is already a great country. Our challenge, it seems to me, is to make that greatness apply equitably and fairly to all of its citizens. That's our challenge. It can be education. It has to be accessible, and it has to be affordable. Housing, accessible and affordable. Energy, accessible and affordable. No matter what it is, our challenge is to make the greatness of this country accessible and affordable for all of its citizens. And that's what we're trying to work on up here. So for God's sake, don't get carried off into these arguments that monetizes everything. I want to repeat that. Don't get hung up in the arguments that monetizes everything. If you talk about reparations up here, reparations, the root word for reparations is repair. You know, it's not a dollar, it's to repair. So when you allow people to carry the reparations argument to a dollar, you have lost it. But you can't monetize the repair that's required to undo what has been done as a result of slavery and Jim Crow and everything else. We have to develop ways to repair that and to do what is necessary, in my opinion, to make amends for that. Not to write me a check, but to give me an education, to let me have housing, to let me have affordable energy, those things that are required to make it in this society. And so let's not let them carry us on these arguments. And I see so many people. I was at the meeting not long ago, and the guy jumped up in the back of the room, tell Nancy to write the check. I said, well, who do you want me to make it out to? So these kinds of arguments have got us chasing our tails. Just remember, what is required to make this country great for everybody is accessibility and affordability. So thank you so much for what you do. And I don't care what Eddie says to you, don't let him call you, have you chasing his next book.
I'm a rep. Okay, we got 2 questions. We're going to go very, very quickly. Go ahead, Khadijah.
Hi, good afternoon. So I've enjoyed the conversation. I had the opportunity to start in radio and then move to television and film and work with Terrell and, sorry. Oh, speak up. Okay. I had the opportunity to start in radio and then move my way to film and television, and now I'm working with an author. And he's a Black author, New York Times best-selling author. He's been presented with his own imprint. And having just started working with him, I feel like he has become a bit of he's our Black guy for the publishing company. And he has a lot of plans and ideas and really wants to be able to step out and move out and start new ideas. And with his imprint, he's publishing books from authors of color. So my question is really, how do I support, and what kind of ideas does he need? Does he need to leave the publishing company that he is with and start on his own, or can he create his own foundation, his own block, his own purpose within this company and still grow?
You know, there are a lot of times when you're the only one of color at a company. I've definitely had that experience in my previous life. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that you can leverage the access that you have, or he can leverage the access he has. And even though they look at him as the Black one, there are probably a certain amount of resources that are probably afforded to him that he might be able to leverage to his advantage before he wants to strike out on his own. So I would say maximize the opportunities he has internally. And if they want to get behind the Black guy, get behind the Black guy and take that as far as he can take it. Create other opportunities where he can create them for others to come in, so he's not the only one. And then when he's ready, he can strike out on his own, knowing that he's done everything he could at the place where he was with the resources, access, etc., and then make that leap. That would be my suggestion.
Great advice.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of times we don't understand phasing, and so I don't know what phase he's in, but here are my kind of quick thoughts. If he already has the resources, the access, the network, the connections, etc., sure, go jump out. If he doesn't, what a great opportunity to leverage somebody else's resources, begin to build that network, begin to get that access so that when he does jump out, he's well prepared. So he has to do the analysis, and you can help him do the analysis himself, but don't jump out without don't jump out with a parachute. That's crazy.
Fantastic. Next question, quickly, please.
Greetings. I am Krishani Watson, a third-year public relations student at Florida A&M University.
Hello.
AMU.
There you go. Go Rattler.
I'm currently interning under a program called Rocky Mountain Black Conservatives. It bridges the gap between minorities and conservatives. So it's been an interesting experience and everything. And my congressman, he's a veteran, so he talks a lot about how he came back from the war and how he feels kind of a guilt about how his fellow peers have, fallen and stuff like that. And I kind of related with that because not all the students at Florida A&M got to be in the Capitol this summer. So my question would be, what are some things that I could do to bring back into the community? I love the marches and the movement, and that's great. After we march for 3 hours, my peers, they still don't know how to manage their money. They still don't know how to get jobs. They still don't know how to dress, stuff like that. So what are some things that I can implement going back into the fall semester to, carry some people with me?
Well, I mean, and I think I understand your question. When I was a student at FAMU, I actually put together one of the first music industry conferences down there. It wasn't really a conference, but it was really more. I convinced the student activities, and Larry Tate was there, to bring down a few experts, fly them in and kind of and create a mini summit, and it was really just for an afternoon. But, I think maybe with all of these relationships that you're growing here, you can actually bring some of these people to Tallahassee and create your own workshops. I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, and I'll add, you attended, again, one of the greatest universities on the planet. You have some of the
quite
greatest
possibly
alumni,
the greatest.
Right. You have some of the greatest alumni, and I want you to leverage your alumni base. You got 2 right here. There's some in the room. we all come to homecoming, or we should be. Common will be there this year. Packer will be there. I will be there. I'm going to get Rashidi to come. If you need us to do something around professional development and have some conversation with the students, ask. Be forward thinking, but don't be scared to ask. Great question. Next.
Thank you. My name is Leah. I'm a local, and by local I mean I'm from DC, film producer, director, and I also film mentor. And so my question has to do with, somebody talked about everybody having a seat at the table, that good ideas are everywhere. And my thing is, how do I teach young people to be their voice without compromising, and I myself, because I've been in the room with, these white males, and I've dressed in a way that, that would be appealing, and then they would take me in. How do I do that not compromising, because I'm a minority, I'm also LGBT, so I dress a certain way. How do I do that? So that's my question.
So I've been in those rooms. So when I was working with Tyler Perry, I was myself and my boss, we were the only two black women in the room. The president of TBS was a white Jewish male. Thankfully, he saw a light in me and in us, but I wouldn't compromise who you are. I would know your audience, know the room, but what makes you unique is going to be special. And they need to see you for exactly who you are and who you represent, because that's part of your package and part of you. So I would say don't change just for the white men in the room. I would bring all of your flavor, all of your essence, and make sure they understand how unique and great that is, versus trying to tone down who you are. Because if you try to present in a room and you're not authentically yourself, I don't care if it's your dress, your talk, whatever it is, if you're not authentically yourself, you're not even going to present well. You are going to sound false. You're going to be nervous. Your hands are going to shake. And then when you leave, even if you get the deal, you're going to feel like, God, but I sold them somebody outside of who I was, so do I have to be this way for the next 6 months, the next year? That's not going to serve your soul. Serve your soul well, be the unique you that you are, and bring all of your excellence and greatness to the table, and they will come to you. They will bend to you.
Excellent answer.
Can I jump on that one? 10 seconds, Terrell?
10 seconds.
Yeah, you did. I know. And I'm going to go on the other side of it, which is, I'm constantly surprised at how small we tend to define our identity. I can be in a suit. I can be in a T-shirt. I have both my ears are pierced. I have tattoos. I can be tattooed up, or I could be in a suit. All of those are me. So the only thing that I want to add to this is don't define your identity to being too small. Make sure that you understand the totality of who you are, which just gives you a broader breadth and a spectrum to walk into a room and feel like you can be you. So I want to just leave you with that piece. Also, one more thing, which is make sure that how you walk into a room and you step into a room is not so loud that people can't hear you. A lot of times, again, we get so concerned with the color of our hair, the flavor, that we walk into the room and nobody can even hear our brilliant voice. So I just also want to give you that piece as well.
Yeah, and I will say that, I personally, being rep, am usually the only person of color that ever walks in some of those offices. And, I'm sure, Terrell, you can know exactly what I'm talking about. I have to say that when you kind of come in with the confidence that you're supposed to be there, then you're there. You're in that moment. And that's how I always act anytime I go in a room. When I go in a room and I feel the eyes looking at me, or who is this guy? What is he doing here? By the end of the night, I know everybody.
I want to apologize to our other people.
You need to hear me.
We have our guests. We're going to still be here. We can answer some questions. We will meet you all in the hall. We have a very important. I don't want our audience to miss this.
My great granduncle is the one who found FAMU.
Oh, fantastic!
And I'm creating Songhai Federal University of Technology, Industry, Computer Science, and Engineering. It will be based in Shabro Island, where he comes from.
Exactly. So some people don't know that we were founded overseas.
Identity is what you do.
Thank you. So I don't want you to miss. We have Mr. Robert J. Brown, who's coming up next. I'm going to let David introduce him and our moderator. But can you please give our panel a very warm applause? Thank you so very much for Detavio Samuels, for Lori J. Hall, for Rashidi Hendrix. And again, once again, I am Terrell Whitley. Thank you so very much.